and click on that and then type a message to Tom. Tom will be monitoring that. So we'll just kind of patiently wait here as for people to kind of get logged in. We're at about 33 right now. And I think we've got about 80 that are supposed to be joining us, 81. So we'll just kind of let that cook and let people continue to sign on there. And I'm hoping everybody is, the weather's going to be good for everybody. We don't have any issues with that. Where I'm at, it's beautiful and sunshiny here in North Carolina. It looks like we've got a pretty big crowd from all over the country. I was just looking over the addresses and everything here. We got folks from all the way from California to I think New York. I thought I saw somebody there. A lot of people from California. Folks from Florida. Got just a couple more minutes and then we'll kind of get things started right on schedule at the top of the hour. Yeah, we got folks from Indiana, Ohio. Looks like they're from all over the country here. Even Texas. Okay. Orlando. Looks like a pretty diverse group we're going to have for the next several days. That's great. All right, we're up to about 42, so we got just about half of our folks here. We're trying to give folks time to get on and kind of get acclimated. If you've just logged on recently, if you want to go up to the top of the dashboard there and do an audio check, just to make sure that your audio is set up, so you can hear what I'm saying here, and also check your microphone to make sure it's operating correctly. So if you end up needing to do something there. Let's see. All right. I see Tom is giving you a greeting here this morning in the chat space. Yeah, those, I see someone had asked a question here about listening mode only. Yes, I've got everybody's mic muted at this point. Usually at the end of the day, we unmute the mics and let people ask questions if they've got some questions. So, okay, we're at about 58. So I'm gonna wait for a few more, just another minute or two to let a couple more people get logged on here, and then we'll kind of get started. But once again, if you're just now joining us, if you would go up to on your dashboard there next to the audio tab and click on that and double check to make sure your audio is working, that you can hear me okay. Make sure your computer is speakers are turned up so that you can hear. Okay. Yeah, we still got more coming on here. That's good. So once again, if you have issues or have a question about something, if you'll go down to the chat tab and just type in your message there for Tom, he's going to be monitoring those chat messages, and we'll be addressing those as need be. That seems to be a better place to put it as opposed to in the question box. We're up to about 61 now. That's good. Okay. All right. So we'll continue to let people kind of get logged in here. Sometimes that kind of takes a few minutes. But for those of you who are just now joining us, I'll again want to take this opportunity to welcome you to the webinar, the Kettering webinar on the comprehensive review for respiratory therapists. We've got some exciting stuff we're going to be talking about for the next several days. And I always enjoy the opportunity to give folks this information because, like I said, I know that it's been very helpful for my students in the past, and it's actually been helpful for me. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a bit. But we've been around quite a while, and so as a result of that, I think we've got some pretty valid methods and strategies to help you as you work through this process of becoming credentialed. So I just I find it very interesting that as we share this information with folks that we get such a large amount of positive response on how helpful it is, and that's always a good feeling whenever you know that you're doing something that's meaningful for people. So we've got just a few more coming on here. I'm going to go ahead and start the seminar, and because most of the stuff at the very beginning is kind of not introductory, but some background information and things like that. And hopefully by the time we get to a point where we really need people to be on board, I'll kind of go back in and check and see how we're doing with our logins and everything. So we'll move that out of the way. So hopefully you can see the screen here. As again, my name is John Evans. I'll be your instructor for the next several days. As I mentioned earlier, Tom Hill is going to be my backup on the chat screen. So he'll be monitoring the chat screen. So if you've got questions, or if you say, hey, John's going too fast or whatever, he's kind of monitoring that and will give me some feedback. Periodically, he may even jump in and offer a suggestion about something that may make may help some folks or whatever as well. So he's a full-fledged instructor as well. And so, like I said, most of the questions that you may have, he would be able to answer. But if we get a significant number of questions about a particular concept or subject matter that I spoke on, then of course we will definitely go back and try to clarify anything that we can on those things as we work through this process. As I mentioned earlier, I am coming to you from the great state of North Carolina, up here in the Blue Ridge Mountains near Asheville, and it's a bright sunshiny day. The leaves are turning, and it's just a great place to be. Been here for almost 4 years now, and I had the privilege and opportunity of teaching respiratory care for a number of years. But one of the things that I would encourage people about this process, because I know that as you go through this preparatory process for taking your boards, it's a very nervous or nerve-wracking process. And a lot of people are unsure about themselves about things. They're just really just nervous about the whole process. And I will be honest with you, over the next several days, probably your biggest challenge is going to be keeping your emotions in check and not getting overwhelmed, because there is a lot of stuff that we're going to be covering. I mean, you think about it, 4 days, of information that took you 2 years to get through for most programs. So that's a pretty, large volume of stuff. And so what I tell people, as we go through this process, if you start feeling like you're getting overwhelmed, then what I would recommend that you do is I give you permission to just take a break and just go to your happy space. This is my happy space here. Some of you may actually be at my happy space as far as your location and everything. But just feel free if you need to check out for just a little bit to kind of get your, anxiety level down. Realize that everything that we talk about in the seminar, you're going to have documentation in your study guide, in the books and the lecture notes and things that we've given you. So you're not going to have to sit there and write and take tons of notes. What we're going to really focus on is identifying what is the most important information that you need to know for this test. So again, this is a process, and again, I know it can create anxiety, but if you start feeling like it's getting a little bit more than you can handle, just kind of check out for a little bit and go to your happy space. Let's see how we're doing as far as our attendees so far. Okay, we're at 66, so we're still got some working to join us here, looks like. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about who I am. My background is I am an adult critical care therapist, been a program director for about 31 years in Florence, South Carolina. This is right there's where Florence is. But I'm also a product of the Kettering National Seminars. So about 4 years ago, I guess it was, I was at the end of my career as a program director and retired from the state of South Carolina, and was approached by Kettering to work with them and doing seminars for students in preparation for boards. And so I had to go through the same process that you had to go through. All right, that was part of my training. So I mean, I know exactly where you're at. For me personally, after I took and passed the TMC exam, or at that time it was the written registry, I kind of felt like most people, after I'd gone through that process of passing the written registry and the clinical simulation exam, I was like, whew, I'm so glad I'm done with that. I don't ever plan to do that again. And as a part of my job, I didn't necessarily have to go back and retest, because basically the MBRC and the COARC, Committee for Accreditation, they gave you guidance as far as what you needed to do in the program of preparing your students and so forth, and gave you, mechanisms to monitor that to make sure that you were accomplishing it. We had used Kettering seminars for about 20-something years in our program, and our students found it very valuable. But I had not actually gone through the seminar completely. I would get bits and pieces of it based upon my work schedule and so forth. But as working with the Kettering group, whenever I retired, I got to go through the whole thing. And so one of the things that I did in preparation for retaking my test, because that was something that Kettering encouraged me to do, is I went out online and took the online practice exam that the MBRC has without studying, before I even did the Kettering preparation or anything. Okay, just went out and took the test just to kind of see how I did. Well, of course, I passed the test, but my score wasn't off the charts or anything like that. And so I went through the orientation process for the seminars, and after I completed the orientation process for the seminar, I ended up taking the test. And whenever I took the test, I promised myself I was going to do it exactly the way Kettering told me to do it. I wasn't going to do it the way that I'd always done it. I had to, rethink and do things a little bit different just to kind of see if this Kettering process was really as good as, we were saying that it was. And I will tell you that whenever I got my results from my recertification in the TMC, I was just blown away. I had scored 20 points higher than I did with just taking it the first time at the MBRC website at their online practice exam. So I mean, it really bumped my score up. I'd never done that well on one of these tests before. And the only thing I did differently is I focused on exactly what they were telling me to do in the Kettering National Seminars. So I know from experience that the information I'm going to be sharing with you can be helpful. The question really is going to be up to you as to whether or not you're going to try it and to use it, or if you're just going to kind of keep doing the same thing you've always been doing. So that'll be another challenge for you in this process. So one of the things as we get people signing in here, let's see how we're doing here. We're up to about 70 now, so we've got a few more coming in. Okay. Again, I've got your microphones muted, so you don't really have control over that. At some point in time, maybe at the end of the day, to take questions, I will unmute people's mics, and then basically you can unmute yourself and ask questions. The main thing I want to make sure of is hopefully everybody has books, and you should have a study guide, okay, at this point, and you should also have two other books. You should have a clinical simulation workshop lecture notes, and you should have a clinical simulation workshop practice problems. So if you don't have those three books, please send Tom a chat message that you're missing something. The other thing that we're hoping that you've gotten, and I should probably ask this if I can get a response from folks on through the chat message, is did you guys get a sheet, a welcome sheet that has like pricing information for other review materials that you can get on the back? If you do, would you please let Tom know that you have got one of those? I think he just emailed one out to you before the seminar started. And we were trying to, we weren't sure whether or not those things were getting out to folks or not. So we're just kind of doing a double check to see if folks are getting those. Okay, the other thing I want to make sure that you get is this little pin. This is a latent image developer. This is a special Kettering National Seminars pin. This is not your highlighter, okay? You probably got a highlighter also, but this is not your highlighter. This is the black pin, the white pin with the black cap. I need you to do something with that pin for me. I need you to take that pin and uncap it and go to your practice clinical simulation book, practice problem book. All right. Clinical simulation workshop practice problem book. And actually, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. Maybe. Okay. Oh, there I am. All right. So if you'll take this clinical simulation practice, whoops, if I can get my camera going right here. Workshop problem, practice problems, okay? You'll take that book and open it to page 1. Open it to page 1, okay? And what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna take your pen and you wanna highlight this little spot right here, and there should be words that appear, okay? So if you'll do that for me right now, that way we can test the pen. And if your pen is not working, if you highlight this area right here, okay, problem 1 on page 1 of your clinical practice problem book, all right, if it is not revealed, this part right here, if you can't read all those words, including those 2 little stars right there, you don't see that by doing that with your latent image pen, then please send Tom a chat message and say, hey, my latent image pen is not working, and Tom can kind of work with you to try to resolve that issue. All right, so that's very important. Want to make sure you've got all the tools that you need in order to do this. Okay, all right. So I am going to turn this off. That way we don't make sure we don't have any bandwidth issues. And so make sure you've got that pen and make sure that that's working. And like I said, if it's not, make sure you send Tom a chat message to tell him that your latent image pen is not working. All right. Okay. So again, let me give you my contact information so that if for some reason you can't get through Tom or have an issue or something that we can't get through on the platform here to get a message to somebody, here is my contact information. 843-621-7014. And you can call or text me. If you text me, what I would like for you to do is, because you know this time of year with all the election stuff going on, there's a lot of spam that's kind of hitting people's phones. And what I would like for you to do is just type webinar, and then after webinar, that lets me know that, hey, this is somebody that's attending the webinar that has an issue or something, and that kind of draws my attention to the message, and that way I can kind of look at that and try to work to resolve that. Okay, so that's my contact information there. I'd encourage you to write that down maybe in your study guide or something like that, as a backup in case you can't get online to do the webinar. All right, let's talk a little bit about breaks, lunch, and dismissals. So yes, we're going to have breaks. There will be a small time for lunch. We're going to probably do about a 30-minute lunch break. It'll probably be somewhere around 1:30 our time, or I say our time. I'm on Eastern Standard or Eastern Daylight Savings Time. There will be about a 30-minute time for you to get something to eat, take a little bit of a break, and then dismissal will be on time. We will not go over 5:30 is the time period that we've got, or 11 to 5:30 Eastern time is the time period that we have to work within. Usually on the first day, we usually finish up a little bit early, and that gives me some time to get some questions and things like that at the end of the day for folks. But I promise you, I won't hold you over the 5:30 time. All right. If anything, we usually finish a little bit early each day. But I promise you, even though we may be finishing early, you're going to get everything that you need to be successful in this venture in passing your boards, your TMC especially. Okay. Technical issues. If for some reason you have a technical issue, one of the most common technical issues that we have found is that there is a lag in the audio, or there may be audio cutting in and out. I've already checked my audio with Tom this morning, and we're both good. So our internet connections are pretty good. Usually, if it's somebody that's having a problem with that, it's usually because of your internet connection. So if your bandwidth is not very high, or if you have a slow internet connection, that can cause some problems with the sound. If you have that problem, you can whenever you log on, you can actually log on and use a phone line if you prefer to connect to the audio portion of the webinar. Okay. Other technical issues that you may have, again, just send a chat message to Tom, and he will be kind of behind the scenes. He's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. That's what we call him in Kettering. You know, he kind of does some of the behind scenes stuff for this particular seminar whenever he's not the leading the charge for us. Okay, let's see. So the webinar control panel, if you probably have already kind of gotten a little bit used to this, especially if you've been doing a lot of online stuff, and a lot of us have been with the virus situation the way it is. Most of you probably have found that here again, this is where your mic is. All of the chat stuff is right down here. So if you just hit on that drop down box, it'll give you this little open space here where you can type in your message, and Tom will be monitoring that, and that way you can kind of get your questions answered with Tom's assistance. Tom has the ability, like I said earlier, that if there's multiple questions about the same thing, that he may jump in and say, hey, excuse me, John, I've got some questions, and then we'll deal with those questions at that point in time. So he's going to be my right-hand man today, and for the next several days, to help me manage this large volume of people here and during the seminar. All right. So hopefully this feels, the big thing that I would encourage you to do is make sure you go into this audio panel whenever you sign on to verify that your sound is working properly. That would be the big thing. Okay. Let me just check and see how many people we've got on here now. All right, we're still at about 71, so we're still got a few more, about 10 that looks like we're missing at this point. Okay. All right. Let's see. So moving right along, let's go. Again, this is our official welcome slide here. We've already mentioned that. We've already talked about all of these things here. If you do have technical issues and you can't get through to my phone or whatever, you can email this email address, info@ketteringseminars.com, and somebody will respond to that email. We've got folks that are monitoring that on a consistent basis so that they can communicate with you. There is no phone number that you can call to the office. This is the way that the office monitors issues for students and everything is through this email. Again, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. You can use the chat box to ask questions, and whenever we get started with a new section, I usually kind of pause and ask Tom if there's any questions that I need to address before we go into the new section. And then as we get to the end of a section before we go on a break, I'll be asking Tom to identify any questions that I may need to address before we go on break. And so that'll be kind of the format there. And again, at the end of the day, I always give people an opportunity to ask questions for any of the the free time that we have left up until 5:30. Plenty of opportunities to ask questions. You just have to, like I said, communicate that either through the chat, and like I said, at the end of the day is usually when I unmic folks and they can kind of jump on and ask a question through the microphone. All right, let's see here. So a couple of other things. There are going to be practice exams that you're going to have access to as a part of this process once after the seminar. If you're concerned about how much CEUs if you're a student, you're probably not, but if you're somebody that's taking this as part of a continuing education credit process for licensing, the seminar is worth 21.32 CEUs. We do have tutoring support. And so here again, anything that I say during the seminar, that if I cover it too quickly or you forget to ask a question about something, you always have the opportunity to call the tutoring line and schedule a time or go online and schedule a time to talk with someone, a live person, about your question via telephone. Okay, so that's just added support that we give you as a result of attending the seminar or webinar, I should say. We do not allow recording. This material is copyrighted. Again, even though you can't record it, you do have recording of the webinar, and the content is available for you to purchase at a very reasonable price. So you can go to our online website to purchase audio for this webinar if you would like. All right. Okay. Now, there are some misconceptions about the seminar. Those are some things that I want to really make sure that I talk about here before we get started, because for whatever the reason, sometimes people feel like that the Kettering seminars, that if you just go to the seminar, that there's going to be this special pixie dust that it gets sprinkled on you and you're just going to automatically pass. Okay, that there's no work involved, that there's nothing that you have to do except listen to what we have to say for 4 days and you'll be good. And that cannot be further from the truth. Okay, so that kind of brings me to the next misconception, is that I'm not going to have to study or prepare for my exams after the seminar. I mean, that's just not going to happen. I mean, not unless you've got a photographic memory, or you've already spent the time learning the material and you don't have to use or you don't need much time to prepare for the exam. So what I like to tell people is, from my experience, there's always two types of students. The first type is someone who listens to everything the instructor says, hangs on every word, writes everything that comes out of the instructor's mouth, may even, tape the lectures and so forth, and then takes that stuff home and puts it in a very formalized, structured study plan, studies it, learns it, and does well on their exams while they're in school. And basically has committed that information to long-term memory and remembers most of the information that they've studied. On the other hand, there may be some of you like my little friend here, Derica. This is one of my former students. She's kind of my poster girl. All right. Every program's got one. This young lady came to our program, again, from a rural community, small town. She had several issues that just, I mean, basically what I call it is just life. All right. Her father-in-law passed away. I think someone got sick in her family that she had to deal with and take care of. She ended up getting pregnant, dealing with a pregnancy during through the program. And she just it just seemed like every semester there was just something that was just trying to keep her from being successful in the program. And as a program director, I was very concerned about her, but and it seemed like every semester, man, she was, I just wasn't sure if she was going to make it. But she made it through the end of the program, and she went through the Kettering seminars. And after she took the Kettering seminars, she passed her exit exams from the program and actually passed her TMC exam on the first attempt. And so she was so excited about that. I remember calling me about it. And then she took her clinical simulation exam. She didn't pass it. She missed it by just a little bit on the first attempt, but she went back and took it again and passed it the second time. And she calls me and she says, "Oh, Mr. John," she says, "I passed I'm registered now. I just can't believe it. And I told her, I said, well, girl, I said, I know what you're talking about. I said, I was worried about you. And she just laughed. She says, I know you were. And she says, I appreciate everything you did, John. And I said, well, Derek, I said, I got a question for you. I says, how did you do it? And she says, well, Mr. John, she says, I did everything that you told me to, and I did everything that Kettering told me to do. I said, everything? She says, everything. And so right then and there, I knew, because there were some students that were probably what I would consider smarter than her, that were having challenges in not passing the exam, and I could not figure out why. And so right then and there, this young lady taught me that it's not necessarily about what's up in your head. You got to have stuff up in your head. But one of the most important things is what's in your heart. What do you got? You know, what are you willing to do? How hard are you willing to work to learn this so that you can be successful and pass this test? So, Derica, she's, like I said, she's my hero. And whenever you start getting discouraged in this process, I want you to think about her, because, like I said, if she can do it, you can do it. All right. The other thing people have a misconception about is that if they pass their registry and they become a registered, they're going to make a great therapist. No, that's not what makes a great therapist. The next several days, we're going to be teaching you how to pass a test. All right. So being a great therapist is only one element or one piece of the pie for being a great therapist. All right. And oftentimes in the seminar, I always get this, well, I wish my instructor would have taught me to do it the way you tell us to, because it'd have been so much easier. And I want to tell you right now that the only reason I'm telling you to do it this way is for the test. Your instructor, what they did was they took the time and the effort to show you all the different aspects and elements of this concept so that you could take that information and learn from it and use it in a way to make you a great therapist. Okay. So a great therapist is not somebody that just has RRT, because I'm going to tell you, there's people out there that are registered I wouldn't let treat my dog. And I'm sure most of you have seen those people and experienced those people. Okay. So the thing there to remember is passing it is not what's necessarily going to make you a great therapist. All right. It's going to help you to be a great therapist, but it's not going to be the thing that makes you the great therapist. You got to take everything you've learned in school, add it to what it takes to pass the credentialing exam, and then use those two things together in taking good care of your patients, and that's what makes a great therapist. Okay. So our objectives for the seminar here is to identify the content and preparation resources for the TMC and the clinical simulation exam. That's what we're going to be doing for the seminar, is showing you the tools that we at Kettering have to help you accomplish this process and make sure you know how to use those tools. All right. The next thing is you're going to do practice exam preps, strategies, and testing skills. We'll talk about those things. We're going to review the MBRC formats and structures, but the most important thing is that you pass the exam. That's what we're really focused on here. So everything that we tell you in the webinar is focused at passing the test. So if we tell you to approach a question in a little bit different way than maybe the way your instructor has told you, we're not trying to tell you what your instructor told you was wrong. What we're trying to tell you is that if you'll do it the way we encourage you to do it, that you're going to have better success. Okay, because that's been what our experience has been. So that's what we're all about, is passing the exam. Let me give you a little bit of overview of the Kettering process. So this is what's going to happen over the next 4 days. So day 1, 2, and 3, what we're going to be doing is going through and identifying the test content in the study guide. And so basically that's going to be our biggest job, is identifying what's the important stuff that I need to know. All right. And we'll do this by have you highlighting specific things in the study guide so that you'll have a roadmap of what you need to know in order to be successful in this test at the end of the 4-day seminar. Okay. On day 3, we're going to show you how to use the workbook. Again, that's one of the books that you've got, should have. There's your workbook. I forgot to mention that about our books. We're going to show you how to use that workbook, and it's not going to be like you've used workbooks in the past. We got a very special method that we want you to use that workbook for, okay? So we'll use that to kind of help show you how to prepare for the TMC, and then we'll start on the clinical simulation exam information on day 3. All right. So we'll kind of get a bit of a start on that on day 3. On day 4, we're going to finish up the clinical simulation and show you how to prepare for the clinical simulation exam. So that's kind of what our 4 days is looking like. And again, you've got a schedule in your study guide that shows you kind of the sequence that we go through. Again, this is a 4-day seminar or a 4-day webinar. Usually we do this same information in 3 days at a live seminar. So just know that we may make some different adjustments in terms of what we cover when in order to get through this for the 4-day session. Okay. We do have some additional study materials that you'll be eligible for. You might want to write this discount code down someplace on maybe that sheet if you have the review sheet or in your study guide. This is the code that you'll need in order to be given your discount. And some of the discount materials that you can get are things to prepare you for your exam materials, the audio programs, you can get those at discount, the flashcards, the clinical simulation practice problems, more of those, and online exam practice tokens for practicing more exams. Again, we have audio and flashcards that are available by app so that you can download the app so it's actually on your phone and you don't have to have an internet connection in order to do that. Most of the audio stuff is you can either get it by app or you can get it by internet connection. Okay, so all of this information will be shared with you through a post-webinar email. And what you'll be given in that webinar email will be your two, you'll be given 2 full TMC practice exams to use, and I'll talk to you about how to use those. 1 full clinical simulation practice exam. You'll also be given a link for webinar evaluation. That's survey, that's to give us some feedback on what we did right and what we did wrong. We really value that information for sure. Your discount code for your additional study materials will be in there. And the thing I want to point out here is to remind you that this discount code is really only valid for 2 weeks post-seminar. So as soon as this email comes, you want to log on and set up your discount account or license, I guess is what they call it, so that you'll have access to that. All right, because you've only got 2 weeks after the seminar to order the stuff at a discounted rate. You'll also get a CEU certificate. Some of you that may not be necessary for you, but if you're working and licensed in a state, there will be an actual certificate that is attached in a PDF file to the webinar email. There will be 3 free tokens for online practice, and you can schedule an appointment with the tutor. The instructions on how to do that. Okay. So keep in mind, I know that some of you think that the MBRC is kind of like this, like the guy over here in the background. You're over here working really hard trying to get your license and everything, and here's this Yahoo in the background that's just trying to scare you half to death and make it hard on you. That's not what they're there for. They just want to make sure that you know what you're doing so you don't hurt anybody, okay? So the process sometimes seems like this is what's going on, but that's really not what's going on. What's really going on is, do you know what you're doing, and are you safe to take care of people? That's kind of what they're trying to evaluate. All right. Again, most everybody knows about the MBRC. This is their contact information. You can get all of this stuff online at their website. The thing that I would point out here to you is that they do testing only Monday through Saturday, and that the testing times are 9 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. Okay, so there's only 2 testing times. They only do it twice a day during those days. Okay, if there are other issues or things like that, you would have, as far as scheduling, you may have to talk with them directly. Okay. All righty. So exam fees. These tests are not cheap. The TMC is $190. The clinical sim is $200. So I mean, you're spending close to $400 to get credentialed. And Well, my suggestion is that you take the time and effort and energy to prepare for this before you take it the first time. Some people have the attitude, I'm just going to go spend $400 or $200 and take it and see what it's like. Well, you can do that, but I'm telling you from experience, most people don't do very well with that approach. And so if you want to save yourself some dollars, put forth the work and effort in preparing the way we suggest, and you're going to be done with this process the first time through, and you're going to feel a whole lot better about the process if you'll do it that way. Okay. The other thing that people have difficulty with is the idea of where they're at when they're taking this test. And so we at Kettering, we want to kind of give you this illustration here of Utopia Medical Center. That's kind of like the MBRC's hospital. So you got to remember that you're at, or whose hospital you're practicing at, and you're practicing at the MBRC's hospital. And the MBRC has a certain way that they want things done. And some of you say, oh man, this is crazy. This is why I was told to do it in school. Now I've got to learn to do it. Let me tell you something. In the field of respiratory care, you're going to find that all the time. Matter of fact, you're already familiar with that process, because how many of you, whenever you went through your first checkoff at the college in your program, you had to do everything the way the instructor wanted you to do it, right? In order to get the checkoff, to pass the checkoff to move on to the next step. Well, you go to the hospital, and immediately in the hospital, what you have is a situation where someone asks you, says, hey, can you go do this particular procedure? And you say, oh yeah, I just got checked off on that last semester. And they say, great, go in there. Here's your supplies and everything. Go in there and take care of this, and we'll be right over here and monitoring the situation. So they send you in there. You start going in there to do the therapy, and before you get started good, you get this tap on your shoulder, and it's your preceptor, and they say, hey, look, we don't do the therapy that way here. Oh, okay, well, that's the way I was taught in school. Well, this is our policy, so this is what we have to do it. And so what do you have to do? You have to modify what you've learned in school to apply it to their situation, their policy, right? 2 weeks later, you go to another hospital, and they ask you if you've done this same procedure before, and you say, oh yeah, I've been checked off and was practicing at this previous hospital. And say, great, here, go do this. As soon as you go in the room and you start going through your routine like you learned at the last hospital, somebody comes in and taps you on the shoulder, right? And they say, hey, we don't do it that way here. So you see what my point is? My point is that you've already experienced this process, and it's not going to be any different, because if you ever leave a particular job at a particular hospital and go to another hospital, you're going to run into the same thing. Stuff you've been doing for years, they're going to say, hey, we don't do it that way here. This is how we do it. And you're going to have to modify. And so what we're saying to you through this example of a Utopia Medical Center is, think about where you're at. Okay, you're not at your hospital, you're not in school, you're at the MBRC's hospital. And so what we're trying to share with you here are the ways that you need to do that at this in this process, this testing process. Okay, so these are things you need to remember. You only have one patient. Okay, so everything that you're doing to answer that question is focused on dealing with this one patient. You don't have anybody else to think about. Okay, doctors are not allowed in the hospital, so somebody's not going to be there telling you what to do. They're going to be asking you what should be done. So you've got to have the answers of what needs to be done. The other thing is, you never leave the room because you only have one patient. You've got nowhere else to go. So again, you've got all the time that you need to take care of this one patient, and that's the way you need to approach each question. Okay, not that you've got a ton of time, because you do have a limited amount of time for each question, but the point is that don't let the amount of time that takes to do something dictate what needs to be done for the patient in the question. Okay. You have every piece of equipment available to you, and so there's still questions about IPPB on the test. Even though a lot of people don't use it, you still have to know basic information about it. Not a lot, but you still need to know how to do it. So everything that's been they don't tip. Like I said, I've been in this business for a long time, 31 years teaching and looking at the MBRC matrix, and I've not seen but just 2 or 3 things that they've ever taken off of the MBRC matrix as far as equipment stuff that you have to learn about. They just keep adding to it. The patient never dies. That's the best news, is that even if you mess up on this test, no one's going to get hurt. Okay. The purpose of this test is to make sure that your knowledge is evaluated before you get out there and hurt somebody. All right. So just don't take it if things don't go well on the test and you don't pass. Hey, look, nobody was killed, nobody died. Just go back and prepare, take it again, be successful and move on. All right. That's kind of what we encourage you to do there. All right. So this is a little bit of information about the test. The multiple choice exam, there's 140 secure scored items. Only 20 of them are unscored. All right. So, but even though these are not scored, all right, you're still going to have to answer them on the test, and you're not going to know if they're the ones that count or don't count. So you got 160 questions that you're going to have to answer on this test. All right. And you got to treat all of them as if each one of them counts. All right. There's 2 scores. There's a low cut score, which is about 86. And you get that, you get your CRT credential. But I would encourage you to shoot for this one right here, 92. The difference between 86 and 92 is only 6 points. And if you do that, now you're eligible to go on and take your SIMS and become registered. So, I mean, it's worth working towards that high cut score. Don't just settle for this CRT, okay? Because a lot of people, if you're just CRT, you may have difficulty, finding work with just that credential. Get to RRT, and then basically you've got a good foundation to start your professional career in. All right. So these are the type of questions that we have on the test. There's going to be some recall. So this is just recalling information that, from rote memory. They're going to be application questions. These are questions, what I call are the what is wrong questions. So you get a lot of these on the test. What's wrong with the patient? So you got to look at information, interpret it, and classify things and figure out what's wrong. The analysis type question is what I refer to as the what is wrong and how do I fix it? All right. So you got to look at information, figure out what's wrong, and how do I fix it? Now, here's how they stack up in terms of as far as what they look like. All right. So here's a typical recall question. What is the normal range for a PCO2 in a healthy adult? Well, most of us would recognize that as the 35 to 45. All right. So that's just stuff you got to know. All right. The application question, here's one. This is again this is the what's wrong. So a patient has a PaO2 of 175 TOR. The patient or the therapist should conclude this patient is what? Well, if you look over these responses and if you understand that, hey, look, if they've got a PO2 over 149, they've got to be on oxygen, then of course this answer right here is the one that's going to jump out at you and say, yeah, that's what's going on here, okay? Because they're not hyperventilating. You can't tell that from this. There is no hypoxic drive. You can't tell it from this. Certainly can't tell if they're having normal breathing pattern from this, okay? But obviously they've got some oxygen because the PO2 is over 149, right? So this is analysis. This is what's wrong and how do I fix it? Patients being resuscitated in the ICUs, pulses and apnea, the cardiac monitor shows the following rhythm. Well, most of us would recognize this as ventricular fibrillation, all right? The question is, the therapist's initial action should be to perform what? Well, defibrillation, the first thing we need to do, of course, is unsynchronized defibrillation. All the rest of these things would come maybe at some point, but not necessarily the initial action, the first action, okay? So again, that's an example of what's wrong and how do I fix it? So this is the breakdown of the number of style questions that are on the test. And as you can see there, the majority of the questions, about 76% of them, are going to be application and analysis. So you got to know what's wrong and how do I fix it. So if you're a person that can figure out what's wrong and how to fix it, you're going to do good on this test. If you're not, we're going to show you through the review process what it is that you need to know in order to get this knowledge so that you can identify what's wrong and how to fix it. All right. But here again, the biggest part of this test, if you know how to fix it or figure out what's wrong and how to fix it, then you're going to do great on this test. But if you can't, it's going to be a challenge for you, because you see there's not very much, only 24% of the test is rote memory stuff. All right. So again, remember your high cut passing score is going to be about 92 out of 140, and that's only 66%. That's probably lower than what you have to pass your test in your program. So this is doable, is what I'm trying to say, if you learn the material and use the steps and the strategies that we're going to suggest to you in this process. All right. And again, these are some of the steps we'll be kind of emphasizing: analyzing information, summarizing the patient's current condition, then prioritizing what needs to be done first. We'll be practicing some of this. All right. Okay, so that brings us to our study guide. If you will take your study guide and open it up, you can kind of see from the first page there the acknowledgments, folks who are involved in this process, and or I'm sorry, the first page here is faculty and everything. There's our acknowledgments, the preface. Turn over to the next page there, you'll see the comprehensive review schedule. Again, this will be the sequence in which we work through this material. But again, this is only broken up into 3 days, or 2 days for the TMC and 1 day for the clinical simulation. We've got a 4-day webinar that we're doing here, so we'll break it up a little bit differently. You can see the table of contents there. Got some references on the next page, and then that brings us over to the pretest. All right. So the pretest is something we want to give you an opportunity to take to kind of give you some feedback on where you are today. All right. And so as you can see on the screen here, there's going to be 30 questions. We're going to give you about 20 minutes to take this. All right. There is an answer key on page 13, so that when you get done, if you want to look at the answers, you can do that. And then, of course, there's a score analysis report on 14 and 15. And we are, it says 9:30. Of course, it's not 9:30 there. It's about 5 minutes till 12. We're going to come back at about 25 minutes after the hour, okay? After 12 Eastern. And so 30 minutes past, or 25 minutes past the hours, when we will come reconvene and start the process of going through the rest of the study guide. All right. Now, but before you start this, I just want to give you a quick some down and dirty instructions. Whenever you take this pretest, this is what I want you to do. I don't want you to spend a whole lot of time on each question. If you go to the question number 1 and you don't know the answer, just skip it, move on to the next one. Okay. If you know the answer it. You know, if you're not sure and you want to take a guess at it, you can do that. But I would say if you don't know the answer, just leave it blank and move on to the next one. All this is going to do is give you a sense of, you know, how much information do you really know about this stuff that we're going to be talking about for the next 3 days. Okay. So I'm going to be quiet here, and before we go off mic, I'm going to give Tom a chance to come in here and see if there's any questions we need to address before we do the pretest. Tom, are you there?
I am here. Nope, nothing looks like it's showing up in the question box now, so they're good to go. And we'll start up again when you're ready.
Okay, sounds good. So go ahead and start the pretest, everyone, and we will reconvene at 9:25. I'm going to mute my mic. Tom will still be monitoring the question in the chat section. So if you've got a question or something, just send him a chat message, and if he needs to get up with me, he can contact me. Good luck.